Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil A. Kulona, and this is Nashville. On today's show, we're talking with pioneers who opened up a restaurant in the early days of the pandemic. Now, look, 2020 was a year for the books, and now 5 years later have passed since COVID-19 brought life in Nashville and Middle Tennessee to a screeching halt. Many lives were lost and beloved local businesses, some of them shuttered for good. But something strange happened. Despite restaurants shutting down left and right, some local entrepreneurs they went against the grain, and they started to set up shop before COVID was even under control. And now, 5 years later, these establishments are not merely scraping by, they're thriving. Joining us now for the first segment of our Pandemic Restaurateur edition of This is Nashville is the owner of Crieve Bagel Company, Ben Cornfield. Ben, thank you for joining us. Welcome to This is Nashville.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was really fun to watch you do that live, man. It's like a hero putting his cape on.
Oh, man. Yeah. That's way too much. You're the hero. You brought us bagels today.
Hey, if you're going to call me a pioneer, I'll take that.
Okay. Tell me this. Why bagels?
Well, it's actually kind of a funny question. I was raised Jewish, and so I grew up obviously eating bagels here and there, but this is not like an old family recipe. I had been baking sourdough in all forms and shapes, focaccia or loaves of bread or bagels or breadsticks or whatever for a bunch of years. I had been in like kind of a high stress sales job, and I was in graduate school, and we had a new baby. And so sourdough kind of helped me mellow out even kind of pre-COVID. And then during COVID, when the job that I just took a new job that disappeared. And so at that point it was like pretty desperate, leading to some desperate measures. And I obviously living in Nashville for several years, there weren't a lot of bagel options. And then also from a logistics standpoint, it's kind of silly. I'm about to broadcast this to all of Nashville. But,
go for it.
You can bake 24 bagels or 36 bagels in your home oven, but you can only bake one loaf of sourdough bread. So just from like a logistical standpoint, it made a lot more sense to try to sell bagels. You can make a lot more at a time. And so there it sort of was this sort of opportunity meet desire to try to support my family. Mm-hmm. And then I just posted on Nextdoor, actually, was how it started. I just posted on Nextdoor if anyone wants sourdough bagels. That post kind of exploded. And so once I sort of realized a lot of people saw what I saw, like there was a dearth of this product in this space, in this market, it was like, okay, like if I can be the person to go attack this, I think I can be pretty successful. So at that point, it was just a matter of waking up at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. every day for years and investing every penny and making all the sacrifices. And here we are.
I have to be totally honest with you. I was one of those COVID bakers.
Oh, my man!
I did banana bread. I did the banana bread because
it's like a gateway drug.
You know,
it's perfect.
I already make some pretty decent chocolate chip cookies, but I decided banana bread. I didn't get into the sourdough. Let me ask you this before we go further: how did you feel about all these suddenly amateur bakers stepping into the scene during COVID?
Well, you're giving me a lot of credit. I wouldn't call myself anything remotely beyond amateur also. So I loved it. Anything that anyone can do, it's like make the world a better place. I am here for it. Obviously, I love bread. I love using my hands. And if other people are discovering the same sort of joy from that same activity, like I support it in any way I can, every day that I can. Mm-hmm. I'm here for it.
You mentioned, so you posted on Nextdoor. Mm-hmm. Suddenly there's a demand, and it's starting to kind of blow up, or sorry for the pun, rise.
Oh, my man. Yes.
And so, you know, what happened next? What was the decision to take it to Crieve Hall, and why?
Sure. Well, it was very, very day by day. So at the time, I was actually still interviewing for other jobs, like in my sales background, still interviewing for other positions. So it was just kind of day by day. Every day I would say to my wife, like, okay, maybe we should take some orders, or maybe we should not take some orders. Or she would say, hey, should we take some orders or not take some orders? So we were always kind of looking at each other like, are we capable of doing this today? Are we capable of doing this today? Because Lizzie, she'd be the first one to tell you she has nothing to do with the business. That's not true. She was, doing all the paperwork, doing all the orders, sending out the Venmo requests, all that kind of stuff at the very beginning. It was pretty on hands-on for both of us. At the time, we had like a 4-year-old and a 6-month-old.
Wow. Okay.
So it was pretty intense, and she was working full time. And so it was like very day by day. And then after a while, after several months of being like, okay, we've been taking it day by day for several months, maybe we should call this what it is and try to dive in a little bit more. So then I reached out to a few restaurateurs around the city just to get some advice. And the guy that I share the strip mall with now, Yogi, for Yogi's Pizza there, he was like a really, really great mentor for me in those early stages. So then he reached out to me on Instagram one day. I was like, give me a call right away. I said, okay, give him a call. And he said, there's a catering guy in the mall here that is done. He's, in his 60s and he's been fighting COVID and he's just done. He's got a bunch of equipment in here. Maybe you can take the space over. So then I was like, I talked to Lizzie and it was like, if we can get this equipment for the right price, which was like as little as possible, then we could put a to-go window in and then at least kind of get out of the house. Cause I was like, the kitchen was a mess and like the ceiling of my house was like starting to get really yellow and nasty from all the heat every day. And like I was waking up the baby because I was baking at 1, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. So I'd like run over and like try to shush the baby and then run back and take the bagels out of the oven and then like run back and shush the baby some more. And it was just not tenable.
Yeah.
So finally that was like, okay, we can do a to-go window. Great. It took like 6 months from when we signed the lease to when we opened the to-go window. And at that point, on day one of opening the to-go window, we made like maybe 300 or 400 bagels. We had myself and who an individual time was our babysitter. And we just asked her to come and help. And she brought her boyfriend. So the three of us were making these bagels and the line was like down the parking lot. It was absolutely insane. I was like, oh no, this is like...
Day one, you had a line.
Day one, it was just like, this is going to be a really weird challenge. And so I knew we needed more. So then it was just a matter of showing the banks that we were sustainable, showing myself we were sustainable, getting up to speed on the art of baking the bagels in a much larger space with new ovens and new this and new that and new everything. Figuring out how to run a payroll. I'd never run payroll. I was cutting paper checks and it was all kinds. It was just, everything was a disaster. I was like not running any inventory. I was like calling our providers every day, trying to get flour, trying to get cheese. Like no, that's not how you run inventory. So like not coming from a restaurant background was a substantial lift in terms of learning curve. Once we got that settled, and then I started talking to some banks and got an understanding of what they sort of expected from profits and from top line and from margins and such, we were able to sort of work towards those goals as well. And then luckily, like, I live in Crieve Hall. Like I go to the parks around there with my kids and I know all my neighbors and stuff. And so we were able to make enough sort of donating some to local schools and really building that community connection, that community trust. It was like, okay, now we can invest in ourselves, go get this loan, build the rest of the cafe out, right? And now we're doing the same thing again. It was another big learning curve to learn how to operate a full cafe with a big espresso machine and more offerings, new sandwiches, new menus, more staff, people actually walking in, and then you got to clean up after them instead of, just coming to the to-go window and they're done.
Yeah.
And now it's such a great time. We're hopefully, fingers crossed, going to be opening our second location in May in Inglewood.
Okay.
Which is going to be awesome because we used to live there. So the two places we lived in Nashville, Inglewood and Crieve Hall, each have Crieve Hall Bagel.
Who helped you? Who mentored you as far as learning the business side of running a restaurant? Because it's very different than if you open up a t-shirt shop or any other business. There's a specific... you have to be on top of inventory. Just from my background of working in restaurants and having some friends who are restaurateurs, inventory was the main thing because not all of the inventory will stay fresh and could be used all the time.
Well, that was a huge problem. Funny you mentioned t-shirt store. Merchandise is actually like my huge bugaboo. We have merch, right? And then someone will come and be like, oh, I love this shirt. Do you have it in small? And it's like, oh, no. We have these shirts in small, right? So it's like we're constantly kind of running out of all this stuff. But anyway, being a merchandiser is a whole different beast. From an inventory standpoint, we started so small compared to what we are now. It was a lot easier. We had no real fresh food. We had flour, we had sugar, we had salt. So I could kind of order willy-nilly. And then just like we would just bake the bagels and donate what was left over at the end of the day. And that was kind of it. The cream cheese was the only thing that had the expiration date. And that's
correct me if I'm wrong, you make your own cream cheese, right?
Yeah, make our own schmears. We have a lot of flavors now, probably like we rotate between probably 10 or 15 flavors of schmear.
Wow.
We make our own fig jam for the fig and pig. We're ripping our own feta. We're actually about to finally, those listening know this is like a very much if you know, you know type of thing. Jardinera, Chicago style, like pickled veggies you see on like a hot dog or whatever.
Oh yeah.
We pickle that ourselves too, and it's unreal. Khalil, I'm telling you, it's out of this world. Super hard to make, so we don't make it very often. We're going to start doing that again, too. It's going to be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I've heard a lot about your bagels. What makes them so good?
Thanks. Well, the cheat code is definitely just the starter, man. We don't use any commercial yeast at all. We have these, I think right now we have 7. We keep kind of adding more tubs. They're about 24 quarts. So they're really, really big tubs of just starter, full of starter. And on a Saturday, for example, we'll kind of empty them all down to about 2 inches of starter left in the tub. And then we have to refeed them every single day with flour and water. So we use really good King Arthur flour, which really helps, like sort of the best commercial flour you can get. And we actually have like this huge drill with a super long bit to help mix it up now. We can't just use like a whisk anymore.
Yeah.
So that helps provide like a really good tangy texture. And then we do not flavor the water. I know a lot of bagel shops, which is totally fine, totally the prerogative, will put malt in the water. These places in Montreal put honey in the water. But I found that, like, the water goes down and one pot of water has some water left, some water doesn't. So it's hard to sort of standardize the sweetness of the water. So we just said, you know what? We're going to skip that step and sort of see if it goes. And this is one of those learning processes, like, well, let's just skip it and see how it goes. So that sort of helped amplify the tanginess of it, helped amplify that sourdough. And then obviously when we give it a full overnight rise in the refrigerator, already rolled out. So by the time it's going into the pots to be boiled, it's been living for 24 hours as just bread. So that gives it a lot of time to, the glutens to form and to then sort of build to the point where it's more easily digestible for folks that may not normally do well with gluten also, which is great. So I would say just like the adherence to like the Bible of the sourdough is what helps make it different. And then obviously like we're boiling and baking just like any other bagel shop, and the boiling gives it the outside crust and the inside softness, and gorgeous.
All right, we have a soundbite from you in the back of the house talking with show producer Josh Deepan about why bagels are ring-shaped. Here, let's take a listen.
So there's a couple different stories about it. One is that Jewish bakers like 150 years ago in Eastern Europe weren't allowed to use ovens for their foods. They would boil the bagels and then put them on a long stick and walk around and sell them. That's why there's a hole in the middle. The other one is that there was like some prince from Austria or something weird that loved horseback riding, so they made it look like stirrups, for put your feet into for a horse ride or whatever. And that's why there's like a hole in the middle. It seems to be a really good way to trap heat for like an even cook, right? So like from that perspective, it seems you're pretty smart. So this is the proofer, right? These things kind of jack up the rise process here. These are all the rosemary bagels and blueberry bagels. Right over there is going to be boiling them. The boil is what helps give like the crunch on the outside, because it's kind of like a car bake. And then to keep the inside nice and soft.
Okay. Which one of those theories do you believe of why bagels have the ring
Well, first,
shape?
let me interrupt you. It's really weird listening to yourself played back in real time.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure that's got to be very trippy for you. So I like to think that it was the sort of old Jewish one, because that would seem to be more wide-ranging. It's hard to think that at that point in time, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, that one baker would have made something shaped in a stirrup and it would have sort of taken off in the way that it did and crossed an ocean, right? From just one person. It's not 2025. There's no Instagram. So I like to think it's more of the other one, where the practicality of the selling on the sticks would have been something that happened in like many towns across Eastern Europe at that time. And then obviously those folks going to New York. So that's the one I personally sort of subscribe to, but to each their own, bro. I don't think there's any written doctrine here.
We're just glad they exist.
Yes, exactly. I really am glad that they exist.
Your operation is running pretty smoothly now.
Most days, yes.
Most days. Okay, so talk about that, because some people may be patrons of a restaurant and things may not be so smooth, and it gives them this bad, sorry for the pun, taste in their mouth.
Yes, sir.
About everything, and they may not come back, or they'll give it a bad Yelp review. But not knowing, having worked in restaurants, I know how it goes. They don't understand how things are day to day, so to speak.
Right.
How do you try to keep things consistent?
It's super good point. Something that we made a really strong point of when we were building the cafe itself was to really we stretch ourselves pretty thin from a monetary perspective to try to make it as nice as possible, to make it so people felt like when they were walking in, they were walking into like a quote unquote real business, right? And it wasn't so mom and pop, wasn't so small business, even though on the back end of it, behind the curtain, that's really all it was a mom and pop business. So when they walk in, they have a high expectation, and we do our very best to meet that high expectation every time. But sometimes we're dealing with like a slightly overproofed bagel or slightly underproofed bagel, right? And that can be tough. Or one of the ovens breaks. Or one time we had an issue with the gas line, and so the range that we have these huge pots on to boil the water, because we don't have a kettle, because kettles are expensive. So it wasn't really feeding the flame well enough. So we had to turn off some of the pots and only feed one flame. So we're only boiling 15 bagels at a time. We're trying to make 1,000.
Yeah.
So by the time we were open, we only had 100 bagels with a few of each flavor. People getting upset. We'll have a power outage, and then we'll lose some bagels and people get upset. Or like we'll run out of cream cheese flavors. People get upset. Like a fridge will break, or a walk-in fridge will fritz. And then it's like everything's got to get tossed. And then we've only got bagels and plain cream cheese, and that's it for a couple of days. So it's like, yeah, you're kind of constantly playing whack-a-mole in the back of the house with equipment issues, and power issues and electrical issues and plumbing issues. And then you're kind of dealing with like Metro codes issues, which are always changing, and that's fine and well, and makes every day fun on some level. But some days it's just like, wow, everything could be super smooth. We could be much more consistent and give our consumers that special experience every single time. And then staff turnover is something that we work really, really hard to fight against. Like we offer health insurance, like we pay $15 an hour plus tips. Like we try our best to minimize attrition. We try to do really good training, but still like some of these folks that come in, they're 22, 23 years old. A lot of them are musicians. Yeah. They leave and go on tour. They do this, they do that. So like when you're having to constantly sort of train new staff, you're trying to maintain like, here's how you schmear a bagel. Here's how you build the fig and pig. Like, no, whipped feta goes on the top, not on the bottom. Like, oh, like you said you could do coffee, but this espresso is not very good. Yeah. Or you learned at this other place that doesn't weigh their espresso. Like here we got to weigh their espresso. So please make sure you're weighing the espresso. And so you're kind of always that's sort of like it's an everyday process.
It's an everyday process.
Everyday process.
You're growing and learning.
Yep.
Personally, how has this experience helped you?
That's a great question. I would say it's helped me stay calmer. I would say it's helped me in my parenting a lot. So we had the 2 kids when we first started, and then now we have 3. So the last one's 2.5. And she was born, funny story, the third was born the day that the demolition started on the interior of our space to build the cafe. So like went in, I met the demo guys, and I was like, guys, I got to go. I'm literally going to the hospital right now. It's like, go have this baby. It's going to be insane. And so balancing all of that, I could no longer afford to be the sort of hot-headed, brash sales guy type that I had been prior to this. And fatherhood changes you for any number of reasons. So like, doing all this and having employees, you can't start yelling and screaming when the cream cheese goes bad. That's not good leadership. And you can't start yelling and screaming when the Legos get spilled at home. That's not good parenting. So in all aspects of my life, I had to find a way to like maintain calm, maintain like presence of mind, maintain demeanor in order to help push the business forward and also my family.
Ben Cornfield is with Crieve Hall Bagel Company. Ben, thank you very much for being here, and thank you for sharing our wisdom on the business of bagels with us.
Thank you, Khalil. I hope I didn't ramble too much, man.
No, this was absolutely perfect. Ben was kind enough to bring us bagels. We're going to have some after the show. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, the co-founders of a bakery that opened up during the pandemic, Flour Your Dreams, will share how they went from making sourdough starter during the lockdown to having a storefront in Hermitage. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from Burr and Foreman Law Firm, serving clients with transactional, litigation, and regulatory needs. Discovering how each client defines a win and working with them every step of the way to achieve it. Burr.com. Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Kulona, and this is Nashville. Welcome back to the show. On today's show, we're focusing on locals who opened dining establishments during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Even though the restaurant industry had a grim outlook, these local entrepreneurs pursued a passion and rose to the occasion. Thanks to community support, they went from working in their home kitchens to now operating out of a storefront. Our next guests are no different. The founders of Flower Your Dreams Bakery, Danny Greenberg and Tania Salas, join us now at This Is Nashville. Welcome to the show. Thank y'all both for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Really great. It's really great. Okay, so tell me this. What prompted you to open your bakery?
It started in the pandemic. Everything was high stress, and one of the ways that Danny actually finds peace is through baking. He's always had a really sweet tooth.
Yeah, so I was in a completely different industry. I was building theme parks for a living, and I ended up bringing my crew home from Japan after 3 months with worries of flights canceled and whatnot. And we were all sent home, and a few weeks later, we were all laid off. And in the meantime, in between work and meetings, I was messing around in the kitchen with different recipes and started taking some online classes even in sourdough and different bread making, and grabbed one of my favorite baker's books and just worked my way through it. And we started doing these social distance happy hours, for lack of better words.
Explain those to me.
Yeah, so we would have our all of our neighbors, kind of like 5 different houses around us, and we all gathered on our front lawn, and people would bring, cocktails or whatnot, and I always brought bread.
We would sit 6 feet apart, all in our little chairs.
And we would pass around bread and pastries, and someone thought of the idea like, hey, this is really great stuff. Why don't you try selling it? You're not doing anything else.
Her husband used to order sourdough from San Francisco, so that was a high compliment that he wanted ours.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So a few weeks later, we decided to pull the trigger and buy a used oven on eBay and kind of spend a weekend transforming our garage into a makeshift kitchen, and installed that commercial oven and just kind of started going. And within 2 to 3 months, we were in 3 farmers markets and doing a contactless delivery throughout Dodson, Hermitage, and Old Hickory.
That's pretty fast development for you both. What got you into baking in the first place?
I always loved baking. I used to bake with my mom growing up, and that was always one of my fondest memories of just growing up with her in the kitchen. And then she would send me to. She actually sent me to a cooking school one summer, and that's kind of when I learned my first peach pie recipe, and that was one of the other things I brought once to the social distance happy hours.
And I love food. I grew up in Ecuador, and every street has a panaderia, and that is just part of your life, that every day you go and you get fresh bread. So on the way to school, I would walk by the panaderias, and the doors would be open, and you'd smell that delicious smell of fresh bread right out of the oven. So that's always been something very nostalgic and magical for me.
So tell me, you guys converted your garage into a makeshift kitchen. You're starting this off. What did it feel like? What type of conversations were you both having?
Scary for me, but I had to trust him. We've been together 12 years now, so I do trust him. He'd been laid off. He was the breadwinner before that, and it was very scary when he was laid off. Honestly, in the pandemic, we had a mortgage, and then he said, I'm going to buy this oven on eBay. And we're talking about a 30-year-old, not expensive, but we didn't have income.
Yeah.
I think it was $1,000 for not having an income. It was a little jump.
That's something.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this. I created the Instagram right away, and I said I still had my job, and I was like, I'm going to do branding. I'm going to do the photos. We're going to do this right.
Yeah. So we just started applying to different farmers markets in that June of 2020.
And started going to farmers markets. Where does the name Flower Your Dreams come from?
It's funny. It comes from a friend of mine who I used to work with.
Whose name is?
John Baker.
We had puns all day today. This is a punny show.
So he commented on something on Facebook of one of the things we were baking, and he said, "Oh, look at you, Danny! You're gonna go and flowering your dreams." And I showed the comment to Tania, and she's like, "Oh, that's it. We're gonna have to use that." And that's it.
It's awesome. That's really awesome. Okay, so give me a list of the things that you all sell?
So when people ask us, what do you do best? We specialize in hearth breads. So that's your kind of crustier European style breads. We do a couple different sandwich loaves as well for those folks that want like a honey white or a wheat bread. So that's what we specialize in. We've got a bread schedule Monday through Saturday of which loaves you can pick up when, because obviously we can't do 12, 13 different kinds of loaves every single day. We'd have a lot of waste, and that's another thing that we pride ourselves on is very low waste. We actually have commercial composting now.
Okay.
So we've cut down our entire bakery's waste probably by 60%.
Wow.
So we started that in October of last year.
Okay.
So that was a big thing. And then on the pastry side of things, it's we started with muffins, scones, and cookies. Got about 4 or 5 different flavors of each that we rotate through. And then
it's fun seasonals.
Yeah.
So right now we have an orange cardamom scone. So that's so bright. Grapefruit poppy seed muffin. A lot of people have never heard of that. So we do like to bring seasonal flavors into the rotation. But we're very excited about some of our new pastry offerings.
Yeah, so in July last year, we actually jumped in and bought another piece of equipment called a dough sheeter. And that has allowed us to do all of our laminated pastry. So now Thursday, Friday, and Saturdays of our bake week, we offer all kinds of croissants, danishes, other laminated pastries, all because we have an amazing not new, but she's been with us for about 18 months now, pastry chef.
You all have really jumped into the deep end pretty quickly, huh?
We have, and at the same time, something that we talk about often, and I would say is a tip for people starting businesses, is we actually have done this very gradually. It seems like we built this overnight sometimes, but they've been very small steps. We've seen businesses, small businesses that don't have deep corporate backing, we've seen them fail because they've tried to do too much too fast. So we do rile ourselves in when we realize, okay, this is a little bit too big of a step. What is like halfway? How can we do this without compromising ever the quality or the customer experience? And so we've wanted for 5 years to have croissants. Of course we have. People would ask and we love them, but we wanted it to be right. We wanted it to be the best croissant of pain au chocolat that you've ever had.
I got it. We got a quick soundbite of Danny and Flower Your Dreams pastry chef that was mentioned, Ashley Gleason. They're talking with show producer Josh Deepan about what kind of work they put into their seasonal offerings. Let's listen.
We usually start around 5 a.m., get ovens heated up, and start baking around then. There's usually a lot to prep. We have probably close to a dozen different options first thing in the morning. We do these like seasonal danishes. We try to do them every week. It's kind of a fun little something that always changes. People are always looking for what's going to be this week. We have some favorites. We've got like an everything but the bagel seasoning one that we do with a scallion cream cheese that's made a few appearances. But it's also a fun thing to let Ashley kind of play with new flavor profiles and whatnot.
There's a tomato confit on the bottom, house-made ricotta, and then just some dressed arugula and olive oil and lemon juice and toasted pistachio.
Oh, that's just what I was thinking.
Man,
Perfect.
If that's not a reason to return to your bakery every week, I really don't know what is. If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekalona. We're talking with restaurateurs who opened up their businesses during COVID. We're talking about the challenges of running an eatery in uncertain times. My guests are Danny Greenberg and Tania Salas with Flower Your Dreams Bakery. Okay, so tell me this. How'd you two meet?
We met in school 12 years ago. I was getting my master's and Danny was getting his undergrad arts degree.
Yeah, we both went to the California Institute of the Arts and both not in food service, hospitality really at all.
Had you ever worked, even as a young person, maybe working in a restaurant?
I started working at 12 years old at a restaurant.
Okay.
A seafood restaurant. And I kind of grew up there when I was a kid in Ecuador.
Okay.
But by no means any formal chef, pastry, baking training at all.
So it's safe to say you never saw yourselves doing something like this.
I think we both had a dream, which was kind of absurd if you think about it now, to have some kind of cute little bakery when we were retired. Now knowing how much work goes into it.
How many hours on your feet and heavy lifting.
Oh yeah, no, definitely not for retired folks.
And you all just had a child, I heard, right?
Yeah, Rio is 4.5 months old now.
Congratulations. So what was it like growing this business? We're, first of all, working together as a married couple and also growing this business as you're growing your family.
I don't know if everyone can do it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not for everyone. I think the most important thing is communication. We both talk about everything pretty openly now. We also divided and conquered. That was the big thing. Is I kept my nose out of social media, and I was more of the business development. So in the early days, we ended up renting a commercial kitchen in Donaldson that allowed us to do wholesale. So we were in about 12 or 13 restaurants and grocery stores. So I was business development, delivering, doing the grocery runs, that kind of stuff.
And even product was split at the beginning because it was just the two of us for 3 years. I was pastry. And I think that was important as well. But we do, at our core, I think we respect each other and know what the other person does better.
And we actually like each other.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Humans. Yeah.
It's a partnership.
Yeah.
In so many ways. Now, you guys were explaining a little bit about how difficult it is to start a business and whatnot. Any tips for anyone who's out there who may be thinking, you know what, I make a really good cookie or I make really good homemade ice cream. I want to step into this. What would you suggest or recommend to them?
I think that if you know you have a good product, that's half of it. The amount of times that I wanted to expand our offerings or buy a new piece of equipment, you got to think about all that and what that's going to get you. There's the business side of it, and then there's the artistic side of it, and those two things are equally important. You can have a great product and completely fail because you weren't making any money, you didn't do your cost of goods sold equations well, you're not tracking your ingredients. We do all of that, and we audit it every 30 to 60 days. And right now, unfortunately, everything's so volatile, we're doing it even more often. And that's what's going to make or break, and using every last bit of your ingredients. We might use the lemon zest of a lemon in a baked good, and then we'll squeeze the lemons for our house lemonade. It's just like use everything. Yeah.
You guys cut down waste by 60%. Now, are you giving kind of leftovers and other items? Are you donating that, giving those to food banks and such?
So we do bake on small scales, and we try to not overbake. And throughout the day, we will add maybe another dozen muffins or so just to get us to the end. That said, when we do have extra, we do discount on day odds. So pastries and bread, you can get them the next day, discounted. And then we thankfully rarely have much more than that. But if we do, we pack up little boxes for workers to take home, for our neighbors.
We've brought stuff over to the library and the police station.
Okay.
I will say that, anybody correct me if I'm wrong, send us an Instagram message, but there doesn't appear to be a really great cleaning service that would, if restaurants could donate. I have never heard, and nor have I found in my research, a company, so there's an opening, for a good service that could come and pick up stuff for food banks and the folks that really could, need it instead of it going in the trash.
Okay.
Pastries just don't last that long.
Yeah, you gotta eat them.
So we can't put them in blessing boxes because by the time someone gets, especially with the elements, we don't want it to be moldy. So we've thought about that as well.
I got to take a break in a second, but I do want to ask this question. You both grew this business slowly in increments. What's the next big step you're thinking of?
It's twofold. Either expanding our physical footprint, when allowed. Right now, our entire building is completely leased, and then the other option is a second location to be determined right now.
Okay, well, we're going to be keeping our eyes out for it.
Yeah.
I want to thank you both for being here, Danny Greenberg and Tania Salas with Flower Your Dreams Bakery. Again, thanks for being here and sharing your story.
Thanks, Khalil.
Thank you so much, Khalil.
And thanks you for bringing some of the food that you brought, too.
Yeah, of course.
All right, we're going to take one more break. Don't go anywhere, y'all. We're keeping the fire going with our next guest, Charlie Eblin. He is the owner of Single Tree Barbecue in Murfreesboro. It's going to be delicious. Stay with us. This is Nashville. Khalil Kulona, and this is Nashville. Welcome back to the show. It's a hungry show, or a delicious show, as we may say. If you're just tuning in, we're speaking with restaurant owners who opened their doors during the pandemic, when the culinary industry seemed to be at its bleakest point in our modern times. Now, all that being said, establishments that have joined the show have enjoyed growth and support from the community. And Single Tree Barbecue in Murfreesboro is no different. Joining us now is Single Tree owner Charlie Eblin. Charlie, thanks for being here. Welcome to This is Nashville, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
So tell me, how did Single Tree get started?
I get asked that question quite a lot, and I think it was more out of necessity than it was anything else. I was a regional vice president for a fairly large restaurant company in the Southeast and traveled 5-6 days a week. And then that company actually filed bankruptcy. Then in February of 2020, and then in March of 2020, the pandemic happened. Shortly after that, in October, last week in September, first week of October, I was told that I would no longer be needed in service for that company. So I got laid off. I immediately went up to my office and started calling my executive restaurant friends and saying, "Hey man, I need a job. What do you got?" And you got the same response from every restaurant company in America, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic, Chuck. It's probably not going to happen right now. Yeah. Let's see what happens. And so I did that for a week and a half or so. My wife walked up into my office one day and said, "What are we going to do?" I said, I'm trying to find a job. She looked back at me and said, "Hey, stop depending on everybody else and start depending on yourself. Start your own company, do what you love doing, and let's make our own way, not depend on everybody else for our own bread." And it's that's a pretty large gut punch when you don't see it coming, right? We set out on this journey to just try to pay the mortgage, right? We were that November we were cooking turkeys in the backyard to sell to people in the neighborhood for Thanksgiving, just trying to pay the light bill and the mortgage and keep it going. And one thing led to another. I put a post on Facebook that had a food truck on it and just asked everybody, "Hey, what do you think? Should we start a barbecue joint?" And it was a very resounding yes. I think at the time I had about 300 people that followed me on Facebook, and it felt like all 300 of them told me yes to do it. So
now, question: have these 300 folks had some of your barbecue that you made before this?
They've had some of my food for sure.
So they knew.
I've been in the restaurant business my whole life. Outside of 5 years in the Army, restaurants is all I've ever done. So at 14 years old, I was washing dishes and making sandwiches just to hit some golf balls at a local golf course. So it's been in my blood since I was knee high to a bullfrog.
Why is it called Single Tree?
My grandfather's farm is named Single Tree. When you pulled into his farm, pulling down the driveway, there was one tree that stood out above all the rest of them on the ridgeline. And growing up, I spent a lot of time at his house. And I looked at him as somebody that I wanted to emulate. He spent 28 years in the Army, was a Mason, president of the 4-H club, city manager for Shelbyville, became a federal judge. Did that for 20 some odd years as well, until he passed away in the early 2000s. And so I always looked at him as somebody that if I could be half the man that he was, that I'm doing all right. Right. And it's about legacy for me. Right. And if I can keep his legacy alive, then I can keep my family's legacy alive. And that's all around building and helping community.
Now, I'm definitely going to ask you some barbecue secrets in a minute, or what you guys do. But you said, you're up in your office trying to find a job. Your wife is saying, "What are you going to do?" And she says, "Stop relying on everyone else.
Yeah,
we can do this together. You can do this. We can do this together." So in those early days, when you all are planning it out, actually, we're going to step in. Do we get the food truck? Do we start feeding people? What were those conversations like between you and your wife as you were just building upon this necessity / dream as well?
a lot of scared feelings. I've always been a very confident individual in the restaurant business, and thought I knew a lot about restaurants. Now looking back, I didn't really know much at all. It's amazing how much I've learned since then. But so the apprehensiveness was there on both sides of the fence. You know, there's some security in working for someone else.
Yeah.
Especially large corporations, right? I've worked for restaurants like Ruby Tuesdays and Logan's and Bar Louie, and these places have hundreds of restaurants, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of security in knowing that, okay, hey, I'm going to get paid in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
When you start your own, there's not any security that you're going to get paid in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty scary to look at the checking account and look at the savings account and go, okay, hey, here's what we got, and here's how long we're going to be okay until we have to start bringing money in, and that's nerve wracking.
Yeah,
you know, when you're cutting the checks and the checks are coming out of your own personal pocket, makes a big difference,
and particularly during the pandemic as well, where things are so unstable.
That's the reason why I originally started looking at restaurants. That was the very first thing that I looked at, was buying a brick and mortar, an existing business. Was the very first thing that I wanted to do. That's what I know how to do. That's what I thought, okay, hey, we can jump right into that. I couldn't find anything that I really thought was going to be the best situation for us. So that's when I looked at the food truck side. And then being in the pandemic, it made the most sense. There wasn't restrictions on what neighborhood I could go to, what parking lot I could set up in. And so in doing the food truck, that opened some opportunities for us that wouldn't open if we were in a brick and mortar and having to be 6 feet apart, et cetera.
Yeah. So barbecue.
Yeah.
It's real popular around these parts.
It is.
What makes yours stand out?
Passion, love. I'm not the best pit master in the world. There's some amazing guys that really know how to cook here in town. You know, you got Pat Martin and Kerry Bringle, and you know, there's Jax and Bill at Shotgun Willie's, and there's some really talented folks around here that really know how to cook. Mine is my whole mission is to become the Nike of barbecue. That's what makes us special.
Okay.
We're trying to help and build and grow community, and we're going to do that with undeniable hospitality, the storytelling with our podcast, Single Tree Nation, and then we try to produce the perfect plate of barbecue every single time. I believe people go out to dinner for an experience. They go out to dinner for a connection that they have with that company or with that restaurant. It doesn't always have to pertain to the food. I think our food's really good.
Yeah.
But it's not the only thing that we do.
What is the atmosphere like for someone who dines at Single Tree Barbecue?
My goal for everybody that comes in my restaurant is for you to go back to your car, sit down, and the first thing you say is go, darn, are those people really that nice?
Huh.
That's what I want the first thing for you to say. After that, I want you to say, hey, the brisket was phenomenal. Hey, the pulled pork sandwich was phenomenal. Whatever you had to eat was great. So we try to produce an environment that's family friendly, right? We want the kids to come in and have just as much fun as the adults do. That's why we have little arcade games in the back for the kids. We got Pac-Man and was it
old
Galaga?
school?
Yeah, old school stuff.
Nice.
Right? So, they're down on the kids' height. They're not up at the adult level, so they're about 3 feet off the ground. So the kids can walk right up to them. They're free. They can play, have a good time, right? So we have all local beers. So we have a place for the adults to come in, get a cold beer, and have some, a pork sandwich or some of our smoked wings and our brisket that we're getting to be known for. Whatever you have a hankering for, we got it. So.
All right, we got some sound of one of your cooks, Scott Hanner. He's telling our producer, Josh, how the wings are smoked prior to being deep fried. Oh, that sounds delicious. Let's take a listen.
So what kind of rub is on them?
It's our house signature rub.
Okay, so you can't tell me that?
Nah, I'm not going to tell you what's in it. We do a dry rub. We got a buffalo sauce, so people will get them tossed in our white sauce. We basically pull them off once they're smoked. Probably they're not right at 165, and then we cool them down, and then we basically deep fry them for service.
What's the benefit of smoking the wings before deep frying?
It makes them a lot more tender, and you get that nice deep smoke flavor on them. I won't eat wings any other way.
All right, so how long does it take to prepare these wings and some of the other items that you guys serve?
So our wings take about 2 hours.
Wow.
So we smoke them, like Scott said, we smoke them for a couple of hours. We use our house rub, we smoke them, and then once we smoke them, we cool them down, get them down to temperature where they can stay safe, and then we deep fry them in beef fat, in beef tallow. So that adds an extra level of flavor as well as crispiness to the wing. So you get a nice smoked wing, but it still has a crispiness to it. So a lot of people have smoked wings and they're phenomenal, but they don't have a real crisp skin. Mine have a real crisp skin to go along top of it. So, some of our larger proteins take, 9, 10, 11 hours to cook. When you get into the brisket and the pulled porks, it's a low and slow process.
Now, all these recipes yours?
100% all mine.
All yours. So you spent years mastering this stuff.
Yes, sir.
And we were talking earlier, and I came up and I said, I know pit masters, you don't want to share your secrets as a barbecue guy.
Yeah.
But she said, no, you're willing to tell.
I really am. I'll tell you. You can call me. I'll tell you anything you want to know. It's barbecue is not about temperatures. It's not about it's not about a standard operating procedure. There's not a textbook for it that can teach you how to cook barbecue. You can get some good ideas. Barbecue is about feel. Barbecue is about what it feels like when you're smoking. You can say, hey, I cook at 250 degrees, which we try to cook at, but I also know what that feels like when I put my hand on the pit.
Uh-huh.
When a brisket's done, I know what it feels like when I pick it up. I don't use a thermometer to go, it's 201 degrees, and that means it's done, because that's not necessarily the case. Every cow is different. Just like humans, right? We're all different.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with animals. So you can't tell me that one brisket is going to be the same as another brisket, because it's two different animals, right? So this brisket may be the same size, same weight, the whole 9 yards, but it may take a little bit longer. It may take a little bit less time to cook.
So you really are flexible and malleable with it. So one brisket may require a little bit of extra of the dry rub that you're willing to give. So it's not just 2 cups of dry rub only for anything. You are open to
it's a visual
and massaging it, and that's something else. I can imagine that's how it's cooked at home.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, for folks who are good. Hence the family atmosphere. Tell me this. Only have a couple minutes left. You're on this journey. Lifetime in working 14, I too, first job, 14 washing dishes at a diner. You learn, you hear some crazy language and learn a lot of things as a kid when you're in that situation. This lifetime of working for corporate restaurant establishments, going into setting up your own, realizing I spent 20 some years, but I still have a lot to learn. When you reflect on this journey that you've been in, how do you feel? What do you think about?
Absolutely amazing. It's the most stressful. It's the hardest, the most challenging thing that I've ever done in my entire life. But I wouldn't change it for the world. It's the most rewarding. People walk in my restaurant to come see me, not to even eat food, but just to come see me and say hi, grab a beverage or whatever, just see how I'm doing. I would have never been able to have those relationships. I would have never been able to make the impact in the community as the way I have without doing what I'm doing. And that makes it all worth it. We're a part of multiple nonprofits. We're very active in the school board. We're very active in the county itself. We're very active in our community. And having this business allows me that opportunity, and it's just absolutely amazing to be able to do it.
I got about 15 seconds left. I got to ask you this question. Traditional barbecue sauce, mustard barbecue sauce, white sauce, or vinegar sauce?
No sauce.
No sauce.
Truly, barbecue cooked correctly doesn't need sauce.
There you go. There you go. You heard it from the man himself. Charlie Eblin is the owner of Single Tree Barbecue. Thank you, Charlie, for joining us here on the show.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All right, and thanks to all of you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced by Josh Deepan. It was directed by Tasha A.F. Lemley. Our board operators, Liv Lombardi. The masterminds behind our theme music are Laurent and Namir Blade. You can listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get good podcasts. And the conversation doesn't end here. Comment and tell us what you want on the show by texting us or calling us at 615-751-2500. You can find us on the socials, Blue Sky, Instagram, and X at This Is Nashville. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil A. Colonna. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody, and be good to each other.